Sometimes you just need to turn off the distractions, get to work, and find the universal truths that affect us all and that govern our universe. This is a good place to do that. Mark Foltz and Kat Hobson will try to help with that a bit by bringing fantastic guests. Let's see what's happening tonight.
Welcome to Universal Truths with Mark Foltz. We're coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. And, of course, this is Mark Foltz. And our co-host is usually Kat Hobson. Tonight, I think you're just going to have to be listening to my voice. And we are going to cover something very interesting, kids. So you better get your popcorn and get ready. We are going to cover shadow people. And if I have enough time, I'm going to talk about haunted mirrors because they really are kind of connected in a way. I have two haunted mirrors. One that is in storage, and then one that actually is in my living room that I look at every day. And ever so often I can see the hair of the little girl or the little woman that lives inside the mirror that haunts it. We have little vases on the mirror, and she turns them all the time. Sometimes I hear her laughing. And my cousin, Ellen, has a haunted mirror that came from my very haunted grandmother's house. And it's too scary to even put in the guest room because it scares everybody. So we have people who, and Till Gray has a haunted dresser with a haunted mirror. So they're a lot more common, I think, than people can expect. And we're going to cover why. And we're going to cover why in the Victorian era they would cover the mirrors with black cloth to keep the spirits out of the mirrors. And you know what? They were right. It is a thing. So now, excuse me, I had a lot of incense today. We are going to speak about an interesting topic, which is the shadow people. And I've known about shadow people in one form or other since I was about 6 years old, and now I'm 60. And I guess the big question is, what are they? And I wanted to look at this phenomena from the standpoint of a metaphysical person who's been in metaphysics for 41 years versus the average person's experience of seeing these creatures. And some of them are known to be benign, and some of them are known to be vicious towards us or are rather frightening, whether they mean to be or not. And some of them are a fetch in metaphysical terms, which means to fetch information. And that is something that is a created being sent out to get information, to spy on someone and find out what's going on. So that's a whole different kind of shadow person. And then we'll also be talking about the shadow animals, because I have seen black dogs, black cats that are shadow people or shadow creatures. And they were omens each time, except for one that was something created by someone who was doing some naughty things they should not have done. But we are going to start with the average person out there sitting in the darkness listening to this radio show. The average person who experiences shadow people, it's mostly out of their peripheral vision. And there are so many types of them that it really takes a little bit of investigation to figure out what your particular experience with this being is. And because right now you may be at home watching movies or watching TV, and you can see something moving around in the room in the corners out of the corner of your eye. Or you may be working somewhere where there's multiple figures manifesting in different forms, such as a group. Sometimes they look like a batch of black flames or multiple figure shapes in one bloom sort of on the walls. And sometimes they look like black fabric that turns from a human shape into a strange ribbon, or you'll see if it is intent on frightening you, to scare you, or to get energy out of you, letting you know it's there, and knowing that it's there to scare you for a reason. So, and then some of them, if you pay attention to them, they seem to want to get away from us. They run, they zip, they do something, they get out of the room real quick, like they've been caught. So we're going to kind of cover some of those. Some shadow people do not notice you. Most of them do not have faces or forms. Sometimes they can be omens, of course, and instead of a person's shape, they'll be something else. If they happen to have eyes, which I have seen some with them, they can be red, gray, gold, or black. And I start off by saying they are definitely discernible from shadows. These are usually darker than the shadows, and they are able to transform to different shapes, sizes when they leave the room. They'll become an unusual shape. Sometimes they'll be like a balled up thing of, it looks like black tissue or something, or just black ink or black water, and they just zip out of the room in a odd manner. And these are different. Shadow people are different than a regular ghost. And when I say ghost, I'm going to mean the common meaning of a spirit, which can usually take the form of what the person looked like in life. And that's my experience, and that's, how I believe a ghost looks. We have two things going on with us. We have a mineral body with our physical fleshy self, and then the interior where the spirit and all that is created, and the form for it is an electromagnetic plasma that's created by the functioning of our body. And that electromagnetic plasma is held in place by electromagnetic fields around us. And so the physical self has minerals like iron and all sorts of other things. And the spirit, the plasma, can absorb those kind of things. Our interior self, which in cases it's created, it's in the body, formed by the body, but when the mineral body ceases to vibrate, to live, the interior shell, which is the electromagnetic plasma, which is your spirit delivery system, it separates because it's vibrating, it's vibrant, it's alive. So it eventually separates from the decomposing body. And then the spirit is completely on its own. It's a complete electromagnetic plasma copy of all of our physical self, and it's kept and shaped by the electromagnetic fields, as I said. And at this point, when someone dies, the spirit can download into the larger universal brain, and what we call the spirit, who we created through living, it can come back and forth once it's transitioned. And the ghost is really just a form of us. And the aura, which is circular in a sphere, can project the spirit from all angles as a ghost. Say, like if it were me. I've watched ghosts, and on film you'll notice sometimes you'll see them from the back. They're completely formed. So it's not what we're seeing, it's what the aura projects. And it will project the spirit usually in a 3D form with clothing, shoes, everything, But some spirits that have issues, they only can project what they think they look like or remember seeing their face. And that's kind of a thing with mirrors. We see the mirror and we know what we look like. So they kind of project what their face is, or the front of their body, or just a portion of who they are. And most spirits are an orb about the size of a Nerf ball. What if anyone's, this shows my age. Anyone knows what a Nerf ball is? It's, a pretty good size, like a disc, like a CD disc or something. And they usually, if they're in pretty good shape, they do not look deceased or decomposing. They look like themselves. And if they look like they're decomposing or dead, then there's something wrong with that spirit. They're holding on to something, or they're not functioning right, or there's something wrong, and something needs to be addressed with that spirit. The thing with shadow people that I have encountered is they don't have details that you normally see. It depends upon what stage of manifestation. Sometimes you can see details, but not often. And the first one I saw when I was 6 years old, and it would just stand there and say rather brusque things to me. And it was the only speaking shadow person I've ever seen. And of course, it was the first metaphysical figure I ever saw. And it began to appear to me weeks after an uncle of mine, who I loved very much, he had died, and it seemed to be him. But for some reason, when it would appear, it just talked to me differently. And I didn't realize, because I was so young, he had alcoholism as a problem, and he could be very difficult. And so the part I had seen was, all sweet and kind. And this was, I think, an aspect of him as when he wasn't happy. And he wasn't happy, I think, at that time. So when he would talk to me, it was really different than what he would normally speak to me. But he looked like a shadow person. It was just a black cutout shape. It wasn't his face or anything. So it was kind of a ghost shadow person. Now, most people, when they see a shadow person, they immediately go to the idea of it being a demon. Now, in my line of work, demons are extremely rare, and they have to meet certain criteria for me for it to be considered a demon. But I knew someone years ago that was possessed. I mean, I would be talking to her, and her eyes would turn from hazel to black, and then she would start talking in a Middle Eastern accent. She had a lot of damage, a lot of emotional, physical, mental damage, and she just was just an open vessel for to let this in. And within a year of her becoming possessed, she was decapitated in a car wreck. And when things like that happen, the spirit usually is wanting to get out of that person. They can't use them anymore. So it's no longer useful to the demon. And there are spirits out there that are like a virus, and they can infect your electrical system if your system isn't up to working to par. But they're not necessarily a demon. A demon really wants to drive the car. They want to control you. They want to destroy you. They have a hate for humans, which in the ancient days, there's probably reasons for it. I think we destroyed a lot of them when they were in physical form. And so they have a hatred for us. And I understand that thoroughly, that why they would get ticked, but they're not very, demons are not very common. But they do have a axe to grind. So, but most shadow people do not fall into that category. Some people believe that they are astral projections of people having out-of-body experiences. But in my opinion, I have not found that experience yet. Everything that I've encountered has usually had a different attitude or job or ulterior motive. But it didn't seem to be people projecting, because I know what that's like. I do that myself on purpose and was trained how to do that. And it's a whole different experience, but that's not what I've encountered. And some people consider them to be interdimensional beings from other dimensions, which is very possible. That may be something to look at. I don't believe present-day science has found a way to observe these energies. So we would have to look at it in a metaphysical science attitude here. And with metaphysical science, we have accommodations for all living things. Everything is energy. It doesn't die. It becomes a different form. So we have to keep an open mind to what can come out of that experience. I've seen one or experienced one that one aspect of it was alien-like. And when I say that, when I say alien, I mean foreign or elsewhere. And we will cover that a little bit too. And anything which has a basis, if it can exist in physical form, it can exist in metaphysical form. Some things can be created through thought form energy using our PSI energy. And but shadow people usually look like something from a nightmare, and sometimes they are very disturbing. We're going to have to take a break, but we will be back with you. Go grab your popcorn and sit, and let's see what we can get into. Be right back.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And now I'm back. This is Mark Fultz for Universal Truth here at WBHM-DB in Birmingham, Alabama. And I am talking to you about shadow people. Now, they're very disturbing because they usually have a human shape. And they usually are in a male shape. I haven't seen any female ones yet. And they act in very odd, disturbing motions and odd mannerisms. And there is a branch of them that seem to be wearing old-fashioned hats, such as fedoras and derbies. But some spirits from other belief systems like voodoo, there are spirits who wear bowlers and fedoras and top hats. So some of them may be related to other belief systems and not at all like a typical shadow person. I mean, there's many branches, more branches than we know. But I have seen a little bit of all of that. So they don't always have a specific form that they keep, because I've seen some turn from a human shape into an indescribable blob-looking thing that looked like black water, or Teal Gray has one at her house that it looks like a gray ribbon when it's dematerializing, and it would shoot across the room. And one time her and her daughter chased it behind a chair that it disappeared into. And the reason they look that way, they can disappear in the walls, through cracks, between doors, and they disappear like that when they act like when they see that you see them, they act frightened and they got to get out real quick. And they do it lickety-split. They'll just all of a sudden go from a form to like a ball of stuff flying across the room. And they're just strange. And but we're going to cover why they have that black fabric look. There's a reason. But we will cover that. I've also encountered fetches. Now, in metaphysical, I've known metaphysical people who have created fetches to spy on people, and they tried that on me one time. And because we have auras that are electromagnetic fields around us, and they contain 36 to 48 hours of information at any time. So these electromagnetic fetches, which are created with PSI energy. So what that is your personal psychic fluid that you put into it, and it gets a little bit of your consciousness, and it can think. It may take orders, or if it has enough consciousness, they begin to think for themselves. So once you create them, they kind of get out there. But they sent that fetch. I've seen it happen to people, even to me, and it picks up information out of your aura like static electricity. And then it takes it back to the person and downloads it to their aura, and they perceive whatever information they gave to them. So they can spy on you doing that. And that's a whole different little field. That's a ritually created shape or shade. and once they get the information, sometimes they can be malicious because people will send them also to do to scare people. So most shadow people don't do that. That's a whole different creature. And a fetch is a creative being with consciousness and intent. And some shadow people are believed to be neutral. So you have to be careful what energy you project on them because they're neutral. They might, if you put energy on them, you get scared, you think they're really something bad. And they find out if they do something to scare you, then they can eat off your thermal heat or your thermal energy you're putting off. So then they go, oh, if I open a drawer, if I close a cabinet, or I can eat. And then they start doing things to scare you so they can eat, and that gives them an idea. And they begin to be like bad toddlers. You know, they're just really just very unusual, very basic consciousnesses. And if they are a remnant of a person, that's their ghost or their shape is so degraded that they can't project form or features anymore. They can function somewhat, but they don't even remember what they look like. They don't have the energy to project what they were. And if they, and some of them stay around the body, I mean, where they're buried. So to eat off the body, and also as a safe space to go. And some shadow people are just scared little shadows of their former self. They just are around. They may look scary, but they really aren't. Those aren't harmful. They just are around sometimes. You can get them out of your house. If they haven't gone through the transition when they died, but they still want to stay around life, and they haven't cleaned off all their ectoplasm and all that stuff, and their plasma hasn't transformed into a higher frequency, then they're like ghosts who just find a way to exist around where they lived or whatever, and they just become lower vibrational since because in our plasma form, our ghost form, our ghost body, we have chloroplast in our plasma, and that helps with ghosts or our spirits. Say, like if I died tomorrow and I transition, if I were around here, came back and forth, I could, because of the chloroplast in the plasma, it'd be like photosynthesis. You use heat and light, and you could eat food. You'd be energizing yourself. It's a self-help feeding system. But if they hang out and they didn't burn off their I'm trying to think what it is now, ectoplasm, then it will get to be where they begin to eat material that's lower vibrational. So they'll eat minerals. They'll eat off of their own corpse if there is one to eat off of, because it has iron and vitamins and methane gas. And and as the flesh decomposes, it can feed off of that. But that's why, like, some of the ones look like fabric, because the ectoplasm is darker, because they're eating darker things, heavier material. So the ectoplasm begins to look like fabric, and it begins to look like, to me, it looks like black gauze or black silk gauze. And the ones that really hang out in the dry spot or dry place, safe place, the graves or cemeteries, they can eat off of other bodies too. It's not just eating off of bodies. They can eat other things, but it's usually they have to find a way to eat something that is decomposing so they can absorb it. And we're going to talk a little bit about the forms of dogs, birds, cats, which can be shadow omens. They usually, in metaphysics, we thought those were like something like a Hecate omen, where because she was the goddess of the underworld and animals who are and some of those animals are used for omens. And I've seen dogs that have come around, the black dogs, to warn right before, like a week before a death or before something that was I needed. It was a sign to let me know to keep my eyes open. And the dogs, some people consider them the hounds of hell, but really they're not. The universe really tries to let us know and have a heads up and tries to help us sometimes, and we get little warnings. But we've gotten so away from our earthy self, that from our relating to the earth, that we don't know what we're seeing. We just go, "Ooh, that's scary." But in the old days, they would go, "Okay, there it is." Now, there are some ghosts. They don't have faces. Some of these things, they are just like a black shape. They don't have eyes and don't have features. I worked in an old house in 1984. We called it a Ghost Manor Halloween Project, and it was in a house that had been abandoned, and we did it as a Halloween attraction to scare people for money. And the house was built in 1902 and was about 5,000 square feet. And the upper part of the house, you had to go to the back service staircase to turn on the electricity. All the windows were blacked out. It was a very scary, haunted place. And in the back part where the electricity was there were shadow people in that room, but they looked like flames. It looked like a whole bunch of them. And it looked like a wall of black flames of fire, but it was people. And it would scare me when I worked there. So I was 18 years old. So I would offer to go in the house, turn on the electricity, so that I'd have to go through there, see those things, get over being afraid of them. And but what had happened in that house, someone had broken in at some point and done ritual. And when they left, they just let that stuff going. And they're like sparks of consciousness off a ritualistic energy racing, or sparks of an old fire. And they didn't hurt anybody. They were just around. And now, when we come back from break, I'm going to talk about my grandmother's very haunted house. And my very first experience was something that a shadow person who did have a face. And it was a very scary place. And also from that haunting, my cousin has a mirror from that house, and she's scared to put it in her house because it'll scare you to death. Because it's just too bizarre, because you'll sit there and you can see the male figure like in your room, but he'll be back in the back of the room. And then if you watch close enough, he starts to move to the front, to the mirror itself. And it's just, it was a very scary thing. So we will get back to that when we get back from our break here at the top of the hour. And I will come back and entertain you with that story, because it was my first really scare the crap out of you kind of haunting. So I'm going to go to commercial now, and you just stay right there and prepare to get yourself scared. See you in a minute.
Live from NPR News, I'm Jack Speer. New economic data show consumer prices surging 7.5% in January compared to just a year ago. NPR's Asma Khalid reports on President Biden's reaction to the inflation report as he was visiting Virginia today.
The president is highlighting the work he says the White House is doing to lower prescription drug costs. Even though his so-called Build Back Better agenda seems stuck in the Senate, Biden is focusing on its potential to reduce costs for families rather than the immediate impact of inflation. The president does acknowledge, though, that food and gas prices are up.
I'm going to work like the devil to bring gas prices down, which I'm going to working to make sure that we keep strengthening the supply chains to bring the cost of energy and everything else and the goods that come to America down.
Biden insists there's other ways to raise people's standards of living by cutting the cost of health care and child care. Asma Khalid, NPR News, Culpeper, Virginia.
President Biden says he's done a deep dive on the backgrounds of 4 candidates for the vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court. Biden also again saying he plans to nominate a black woman, that he plans to announce the decision by the end of the month. Biden told NBC's Lester Holt in an interview he expects whomever he chooses will get some Republican support in the Senate. British officials traveled across Europe today to try to prevent a ground war in Ukraine. As NPR's Frank Langford reports from Kyiv, exchanges with the Russians were frosty.
British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss urged Moscow to pull its troops back from the Ukrainian border.
Russia could enhance its stature by abandoning Cold War rhetoric and instead engaging in meaningful discussions with NATO to improve European security.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called the talks disappointing. It's like we're listening but not hearing each other, so our very detailed explanation fell on deaf ears, he said. Meanwhile, Russia continues to send troops towards Ukraine. Visiting NATO in Brussels, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said, quote, "This is probably the most dangerous moment." Frank Langford, NPR News, Kyiv.
Nevada has joined the growing list of states announcing an end to mask mandates from member station KUNR in Reno. Lucia Starbuck has more.
Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak says Nevada residents and visitors will no longer need to mask up. The governor says that goes for schools, correctional facilities, and businesses.
I think that students and parents have been clamoring for this for a long time. Our businesses have been asking for this.
Nevada was following the CDC's guidance to require masks indoors regardless of vaccination status in areas of high or substantial COVID-19 transmission. Infection rates are dropping across Nevada, but every county in the state remains in the high or substantial transmission category. For NPR News, I'm Lucia Starbuck in Reno.
This is NPR. Tesla is pushing out a software update to 500,000 vehicles because they could fail to sound a warning to alert pedestrians. As NPR's Camila Dominowski reports, the problem is linked to Tesla's Boombox feature.
Electric vehicles are quiet, very quiet. They're so quiet that regulators require them to play a warning sound at low speeds to make sure pedestrians know they're there. Teslas have external speakers that do that. But in 2020, the company also allowed users to play custom sounds through those speakers and even turn their car into a megaphone. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is concerned that this feature could increase the risk of a collision, depending on the sound a driver chose to play. Tesla is issuing a voluntary recall that will turn the feature off when a car is in drive, reverse, or neutral. Camila Dominowski, NPR News.
New evidence is showing the coronavirus could be especially dangerous for pregnant women, with the study suggesting the virus can invade the placenta, possibly leading to stillbirths in infected women. While uncommon, researchers say it appears women with COVID-19 do face an elevated risk, especially from the Delta variant of the virus. Scientists looked at 12 countries, including the U.S., and analyzed tissue from 64 stillbirths and 4 newborns that died shortly after birth. All the cases involved unvaccinated women. The research published today indicates placenta damage rather than infection of the fetus was often the cause of the stillbirths. Stocks lost ground on Wall Street amid inflation worries today. The Dow dropped 526 points to 35,241. The Nasdaq fell 304 points. The S&P was down 83 points. I'm Jack Speer, NPR News.
This message is brought to you by the NPR Coffee Club. A subscription brings fresh roasted coffee directly to your door, and you can also give a gift subscription to the NPR superfan in your life. Learn more about our new NPR blends by visiting us at nprcoffeeclub.org.
Hey y'all, this is Kat. I have been producing Mark. I'm still having something of a cough going on here. So I am just about to get him back. We have been having so much trouble. You know, this is an interesting show that sometimes causes these issues. So I'm going to see if I can't get him back for you. And in the meantime, well, there's no meantime. We're just going to go get him. So hang on just a sec. Just bear with me. So, you know, he's been talking about these shadow figures, and I know that every time I run across them, I am often surprised because while they don't really seem to be as scary as they could be, I have a healthy respect, right? So that is something that I just always bring to that table. And when he's sitting here talking about this stuff, I am so surprised when he's talking about like the ectoplasm and stuff like that. I don't experience them that way, but he's done this for a long time and he is brilliant. So I'm trying to get him in here for you now, and I have him. So I am going to turn this show right now over to Mr. Mark Fultz. Mark, I had just lost you, so I've been chatting away with people while I was trying to get to you. And I have been enjoying this show so much. Thank you for taking it solo. And I am going to turn it back over to you because I know you've got a lot more to share.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and metaphysics, you'll find out when you're talking about spirits, they will mess with your electronics. So this is just normal. But I'm still going to tell my story. So there. All right. Now, I was going to start telling about my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was a sweetie, but she was a very psychic lady, her and my grandfather both. And they had a very haunted house that it didn't look haunted, but boy, it was. It had a terrible basement that everyone was scared of. And they weren't talking about ghosts around me. They wouldn't let me talk about ghosts or anything I saw, so I could never tell. If I saw something, I had to just buckle up, Buttercup. And when I had to go and my mother would visit with my grandmother, I would just go play out in the yard. And I would go in the basement ever so often, and there was a little room that was on the right front of the house in the basement, which it was always just real odd. I would go and play in the basement a little bit, but I was scared of it. So I one day when I was playing around the house, I was about 8 years old, I guess, and I was passing that room, the windows of that room, and they had little lace curtains. And I remember I was standing there and looking at something in the room that was moving, and a man stuck his face through the curtains looking at me through the window. Now, I knew there was nobody under there. I knew what it was. But he was, he looked like he was made out of leather. And his hair was sticking straight up and broken off, which sometimes that happens to corpses, I found out later. and where his eyes were. A lot of times later, I found out, people will get, their corpses will get this bread mold looking kind of stuff, and it will make you look like you have a Lone Ranger mask on, but it's a mold that gets into the sinus in the face while it decomposes. And he had that going on, but his eyes, the white of his eyes were gray, and the iris of his eyes looked like hematite, if you've ever seen hematite. And really his eyes kind of look like if you've seen an animal's eyes in the dark and a light comes up, they look like marbles. And it was kind of that kind of thing. And he was looking at me. And when he realized I could see him, he jumped back. And so I went, well, we just won't play around that area of the house again. And I didn't talk to my mother about it till much later. And later on, when I had to sit with my grandparents, I found out how haunted the house was, how scared everybody was of the basement. And there was a man ghost. There was a little female ghost who was like looked like a little Southern Belle shape. She'd run through the house, checking all the doors and all that stuff. And she'd glide through the house, and you'd hear her like she was packing and looking, and she was scared, checking the doors. And eventually the male ghost would come in the back door, go down the hallway. There would be some kind of noise, and it would all kind of stop about 2 or 3 in the morning, but it would just be freezing. And it was just, there's lots to that story. But he mostly looked like a shadow person with a fedora, and he would come in, and most people who saw him, they said he would look like a black and white photograph with the face blurred out. You couldn't see his face. So when I saw his face, that was actually an accident. And but that building had been remodeled, but it had it was over the basement. We couldn't figure out what was going on in that basement. My grandmother thought that the little female ghost was scared of him and killed this man and buried him in the basement. Well, right before they tore the house down, they took out the heating system, which was hiding a capped off well. So I have a feeling 100 years ago that body was in the well. And when they built an apartment complex on it, those people are going to get a ghost, something awful going on, because it's just too strong. It was we had many people who had that. And again, the mirror my cousin has come from that house, and that spirit still can manifest in that mirror. And so she puts it out. She's done all sorts of stuff with it, but I haven't cleaned it yet for her. But she's too scared to get it out of her shed. So, because it's pretty scary. So you can't put that in your guest room and hope for the best, But now I'm going to move to the first time that I can really say shadow people. My aunt, most of my aunts and uncles were psychic. My mother was very psychic. My aunts were psychic. But they, because of their Christian beliefs, they didn't think about it like I do, But they had a house that they had bought and remodeled. And at some point, they owned the house, but they moved off to another place and rented it out. And while they were gone, one of the renters was a self-styled metaphysical person who liked to scare people. And she would scare the neighbors. And eventually they drove her off. And when she left, though, she had used the attic of that building, that house, to do her stuff, whatever it was. And then when my aunt and uncle came back, they closed in the attic so it could be a room to use for, it was a room, but to make it where you could sleep in it and all that stuff. And they had enclosed the pipes at one end of the room behind a little wall, and it had a little opening with styrofoam blocking it. And actually, she had left some of her rocks that she used in her circle. And I don't know why they never took them out, but they just pushed them in the back and left them there. And when they moved back in the house, they had that little hole plugged with styrofoam, and they found out they had a poltergeist kind of thing going on. And they would call her Gertrude. And she would do all this trickster stuff, like unplugging the appliances and play tricks on people. And if they ever talked of moving, she could be heard crying in the walls. And they just acted like she was some kind of pet. And at night, sometimes she would come to the foot of their beds, and if they told her to go away, she would, and then later she'd come back later. And they made the story so interesting. I wanted to experience this like a dummy. So I moved in with them. I was in my 20s. And I helped with my uncle's stepfather so I could be there and see what it was like. And, let me tell you. And I stayed up in the room that used to be her circle in the attic room. And the first experience I had was it didn't wait real long. I mean, within the first week, I was trying to turn over, trying to go to bed, trying to go to sleep. It was a very uncomfortable room. It was just a big room, but it was very uncomfortable. And I turned over and I saw a Himalayan cat, a Persian Himalayan cat, laying in the floor with its head twisted. And I stared at it for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then I got up and went to touch it, and it dissipated. And I asked my aunt about it, and she said that before they had moved, there had been 2 Himalayan cats, and something had happened to them. And I thought, I think I know what happened. I think she killed them. And a few days after that, I was laying there again trying to get comfortable. And in the corner of the room was painted white, but in the corner to the left of the bed, the corner got dark. And when it got dark, this woman materialized out of the dark. And she wandered up to the foot of my bed, and she had beautiful long black hair. She had a big black braid, and she and it was hanging down over her right shoulder, and she was wearing this really dowdy 60s or 70s kind of beige dress, and she had her hands crossed, and she was waiting. And I would tell her to go away, and she would go away. So she was created by that woman as a fetch. And so that's why she had been left there. So she was waiting for people to tell her what to do, to go fetch information or send a spell. So when you would tell her to go away, she would for a while. And her face was very smudged out. But she didn't seem to be the bad part. It was very strange. But also, what started happening is when she would appear, out of that little alcove that had the opening with the styrofoam in it, the styrofoam would squeeze, and shadow people would run out of the wall, run around the door, run down the steps, and if you were downstairs, they'd whiz past you. And we're about to have to go to another break, so I will continue this story when we get back. And because it was very scary. So I have things to tell you. All right. We'll be back just shortly. Hang in there.
Warning, the following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait, Cat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? Well, you see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watched a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page is to, of course, have their own podcast. Well, you know what? You're not going to find that crap here. What we have here at WBHM Digital Broadcasting is the best host, the best guest, bringing you real information. All of the hosts here on this network know their stuff. They are the people who have been out there doing the work, doing actual research. And no, by research, I don't mean binge watching some kind of cheesy TV show on Netflix. I mean reading books. I mean out in the field doing the legwork. And who are they interviewing on their shows? They're bringing you the people they have learned from. They're bringing you the best in the field, covering all kinds of topics from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to cryptozoology to ghosts to anything you can think of a bit strange and unexplained. It is here, and you're going to get the best information here. So stay tuned to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of going somewhere, I've got to go before my mic gets cut. We'll see you there on WBHM DB.
Welcome to Universal Truth with Mark Fultz, and we are at WBHM DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. And I am, of course, in Pensacola. It's like magic. You get to hear me from all the way up here. Now, when I left off, I was telling you about where I lived. And the shadow people would run through the house. I had people who came over visiting, and they'd go, what the heck was that? And mostly they didn't seem to notice people. You know, there were several different things going on. I can't say haunting, but there were a lot of things going on because that, and if I had been older, I would have understood, you know, that circle was still going. These things were still going. I could have closed that circle, closed that energy, and closed it down. But since the stuff was running around and it didn't seem to be hurting me or hurting anybody, it was different. You know, it was okay. Now, one time when I was alone in the house and I had taken a shower and I came out of the shower, opened the door, and one of the shadow people were standing there, and they were like, oops, and they turned and ran, and I could hear them run through the kitchen, run through the living room, run upstairs, and run into my bedroom. And I thought, nuts, So that was special. But something would always happen. We had a lot of people dying during that year, and anytime right before people would die, I'd hear somebody say, you better get your suit out, and things like that. It was very, very, very bizarre. And the last experiences I had there, my aunt and uncle went on a trip to Florida, and their oldest daughter, Judy, who we were very close, and she came over. She was a ghost fanatic. So we were sitting around. She wanted to record things, see if she'd see the ghosts, because they had seen stuff, and she put a recorder on a spot at the foot of the steps because they said there was a stain there, and they didn't know what that was. And she was going, maybe it's blood. So she put the cassette recorder on there. This is how long ago it was. And we walked away. We went in there and tee-heed for 20 minutes, came back, got it, replayed it, and of course her name was Judy. And you could hear on the recording, it would say, Judy, Judy. And she screamed. She threw it. It was like, I said, well, they know you. They recognize you. That means they're conscious. So that night, she didn't want to sleep by herself. So she was in her mother's room. And between the bed and the dresser, there was a spot in the floor. So I made a pallet. And I made my little self an uncomfortable pallet there. And she went to sleep pretty quick. And I was trying to get comfortable. And then all of a sudden, at the foot of the bed, I was sandwiched in between the dresser and the bed. And this shadow person figure with a hat, like a fedora, was standing there. And I all of a sudden felt like I was given anesthesia. I just could not move. I wasn't afraid, but I couldn't move. And I was watching it. And at some point, all of a sudden, out of the center of it, it just started to ooze like a blob, this black material that filled up the space between the bed and the dresser, and it covered me. And it looked like gray marmalade with little black scratches in it. I don't know what the heck that was. And I was sitting there watching it, and all I could do was just watch. And out of the center of that being, this balloonish gray thing came out, and it came up, and it looked like a balloon, kind of made out of some kind of. It looked like a gauze balloon with two great big black eyes, and it got up to my face and began to push into my face. And when it would, all I could see was this gray material in my eyes. And so it was trying to get into my system. And I had a good enough aura that it kept it from getting in. So I was able to say to my cousin, I said, Judy, oh, Judy, something's here and I can't move. And when she woke up, she looked over, she couldn't see it. But the blanket was moving like it was flowing in the water. And she screamed bloody murder. And when she did, it backed off, and I got up. And I said, okay, that's it. No more. I'm out of here. And I left that week. And I thought, nope, if it can make me where I can't move, then that's just not happening. And a year after that, really what it was like a death omen. Because that month, at the time when that happened, a year later, I was attacked in a random act of violence and was murdered, died twice. So it was really an omen. So it was real strange, but it came out of ritually created stuff. So it was very, very odd. And I left the house. They always had other experiences going on, but they wanted to leave the house, and they couldn't sell it. And every time they would try to sell it, you could hear Gertrude crying down the hallway, in the halls, and in the walls. And finally, they just had to let it go to the bank. And that's the only way they could get rid of it. And my aunt died about a year and a half later from cancer. So she didn't get very far away from Gertrude. But it was a very strange experience. But the shadow people that were in there mostly just were running around. It didn't look like they knew you were there, and then some of them did. And of course, that other thing that covered me, that wasn't a typical shadow person. That was something else. And Gertrude, of course, was a fetch, but she had form. She didn't look like she didn't have a face, but she looked like a person. You know, she had the figure. She didn't have the face. And that there's probably good reasons for that. But I knew someone else when I was young that, he was in metaphysics, but he was kind of a bad person, and I didn't know it. Because, you know, when you're dumb, you're stupid. And when I was young, I was stupid and didn't know he was a bad person. And he had a thing going on in his basement where he had like an open portal. He'd say, "Oh, my house is haunted." It was not just haunted. It was crazy. And you'd see things running up down the hall, and you'd have to move the mirrors because you'd see stuff. And he had poltergeist activity. And one time I was there, I was doing some laundry, and I was coming up the stairs from the basement, and boom, 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 right behind me, somebody ran up behind me, and I about jumped through the door without opening it, you know, and it had run up the stairs and bit my calf, and it looked like a little toddler had bit me completely with its complete set of teeth. And so, you know, that was very weird. And another thing he had there one time, we were going to the backyard, and I had to be about 21, I think. And I'm a cat crazy person. Love cats. And we were going to his backyard. He was going to bury some things in the yard, some kind of magic thing. And this black cat came out of the bushes and came up to us looking like it wanted to be petted. It was beautiful. Black cat, gold eyes. And I was reaching down to pet it. And he said something to it, and it dissipated. And I've never seen anything quite like that before, and I don't want to see it again because I know that was one of his little fetches or something. And but it looked just like a cat, so I'm afraid to know how he made that. But that person's dead. He was doing bad magic, ate him, turned to a lot of people who do that kind of energy work. They'll get cancer, leukemia, because the energy will end up going, oh, why should I go anywhere else to get a meal? They have their DNA code because they made them, so they just eat the person and until they die. And let's see. A lot of these kind of things, if you have them, of course, you know, I have friends who have things going in their houses now. Teal Gray has some shadow people in her back house, and she has a haunted dresser with a great story. So we'll have to do a show about just haunted mirrors. But the one in her back house, it looks like black fabric. They think it looks like a black ribbon when it's dematerializing. And I've been out there before when I was sitting on one of the beds in their guest house, and a dime floated, just very nonchalantly floated by my face. And I thought it was fabulous. It's a great, scary place. But if you start having things with shadow people, you need if you're scared of them, you have to really look at them. Are they bothering you? Are they just something that's there? Are they sinister? Or are they benign? Are they just kind of watching TV? You can get someone to cleanse your house. You can cleanse your house. You can reset the energy. Usually these kind of energies you can push out. The ones at my aunt's house, since they were made in a ritual, and my aunt never really took that seriously and had that house cleansed by a priest or metaphysical person, it just kept running. So whoever bought it, still gets it. But if you have children that are being scared by this crap, you have to take charge. You have to say, nope. You got to go cleanse it out, change the locks, change the energy locks, and just go from it. Now, Christians, my aunt, eventually, when it turned bad on them, they were Christians. They started seeing everything as a demon. And so in Christianity, it's real easy for them to see things like that as demons. Islam has jinns, which are very interesting creatures and very scary in a different matter. I don't even know how to explain a jinn right yet. And American Indians even have their own ideas and versions of what shadow people are and what they mean and what you say are to us or if they're our enemies. If you're, and they just watch and see what's happening. Are you being intimidated or are you just being watched? And I lived in a place in Lafayette, Georgia, before I moved here to wonderful Pensacola. And it was a real old house. It used to be on where an old plantation was. And there was a shadow person in there. My bedroom door opened to the living room. And I would see this black figure go through the house, and he'd look at all the stuff we had in the living room, like the movies and the TV. And he'd come in there and stand by the bed sometimes. And if you were wandering in the house, sometimes you'd run into it at 2 or 3 in the morning. And you'd hear a radio playing. And I would try to follow it, and it would just disappear, the sound would. But one night, several years ago, it's probably 5 or 6, we had an eclipse that was pretty dramatic. So I stayed up and watched that and all that stuff. And I was wandering around the house in the dark, going to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning. I was standing in my bedroom door, and all of a sudden I realized I was standing in the middle of this black smoke. And I thought, what the heck is that? And I was standing in the middle of the shadow figure, and it was trying to manifest. So it looked like smoke. And normally I would have been a little freaked out, I guess. But I was so tired, I just went, sorry. And I just went to bed. And because he never bothered anything. That was his home. So, so that kind of covers shadow people a little bit. Now we're going to go into haunted mirrors. I know very soon we've got a break coming up, but I'll try and get as much as I can in here. Some of our beliefs about mirrors come from the Victorians, because the Victorians were very much about ritual, and they would cover the mirrors when people died. They would do all sorts of, put coins on dead people's eyes. They would do all sorts of things, but they were covering the mirror so that the ghost or the spirit of the person wouldn't be attracted to their living self. Because in the Jewish form, Jewish belief system, they believe spirits are attracted to reflective material. And and I have to tell you, it's true. Because I've got 2 mirrors that are haunted, and I'm a mirror whore. I have mirrors everywhere, but those 2 mirrors are just something different. But in the Victorian time, they would have the person in the funeral. I mean, before funeral parlors, they'd have them in their parlor. That's why it's called funeral parlor. When they became businesses, to make you feel like you were still doing it, they would make it like home for your person. And they would make sure to take the person out a door, that they did not bring them in, and they carried them out feet first, so they couldn't look back and summon someone else's spirit to follow them or to die, to cause someone else to die. And the mirrors were covered to keep the spirits from getting caught in the image of its living self. Excuse me. And all windows were covered, and they also believed, some people believed, that if you looked in a mirror where someone had recently died, that means you could be next. So you had to clean the mirror and prevent that kind of bad luck. All the clocks would be stopped. Photographs of the family would be turned down to keep the spirit from wanting to possess the spirit of the living. And if the grave was disturbed, which in that time people were grave robbing really heavily up until 1950s. I mean, somewhere in Alabama from here in the 50s, there was like 120 graves stolen because people would get the bodies and sell them to medical schools and places like that. And so they worried that if the body was stolen, it would be disturbing the spirit. And I mean, and the Irish had wakes, and that's so you would have to see if you woke up, if you weren't embalmed, to make sure you weren't being buried dead. And they would have a wake, but that was to make sure you weren't wake up. And they would cover the graves with iron cages and stuff, I guess. And then make sure if you were buried alive, they would put a cord in the hand. They could put a little bell cord in the hand of the dead person attached to a bell above ground, and that way they could ring the bell if they were alive, which is pretty scary to think about. I was very scared of being buried alive because when I was little, when my uncle died, they went, he's just asleep. And I thought, they do that when you're asleep? They bury you? That's not good. And, there were some good stories. People, when the grave robbers would dig up the graves, sometimes people would wake up and it rescued them. So it's just, just all sorts of stuff. But the Victorians, getting back to the thing of mirrors and things like that. Now, I do have one more story. My housekeeper, my mother's housekeeper in the 60s, she would refuse to go out the door she came in because she thought the spirits in our house would follow her out. And our house wasn't haunted, but she thought there was. So she wouldn't, she never went in she never left by the same door she came in. And, so it's, but the thing about mirrors and reflections, they come to us from the Greek and Romans because water and mirrors were scrying devices. And the Babylonians believed that they would cover the mirror, and they believed life started in the bed. So when someone died, they would turn the bed over, they would cover the mirror, and the Romans would scry in water and mirrors, and they believed that they were portals for spirits to come through. American Indians made mirrors from mica, and I heard that the Anunnaki gave us mirrors, the ancients gave us mirrors and makeup because they thought we were hairy and ugly. And the Romans believed in a 7-year cycle of the soul. So that's kind of like where if you break a mirror, you get bad luck for 7 years. It's because something to do with they believed the 7-year cycle of the soul. So let me see. And the mirrors we know today came from the late 1700s, early 1800s, excuse me. And they're different kind of reflection. They're clearer, and so people began to get more worried about the clearer reflection catching the spirits easier. So they would be sure to cover the mirror, turn it away. And some people believe that ghosts could come through the mirror to find other people, to lure other people's spirits into the physical world, from the physical world through the mirror, to trap their souls. And so it's, and like I said, the Jewish believe the soul could enter through reflective surfaces. And the mirrors that I have, it certainly is haunted. The lady, I heard her laughing not too long ago, and we have little vases on it. And she turns those, and we've got to go to a break, but I'll be right back. You hold on there, and we'll finish this up with a bang, I'm sure. So talk to you in a minute.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome to Universal Truths with Mark Fultz. This is, we're coming to you from WBHM DB in beautiful downtown Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm talking to you from Pensacola, Florida. And we were talking about haunted mirrors. And of course, I think I ended with the Jewish belief that the soul could enter through reflective surfaces. And when I was young in metaphysics, we would do a thing where you would sit in a mirror with a candle and look through the candle flame, and you would see your face transform into what your past life looked like. And actually, that was kind of a thing. It worked. But if your mirror is haunted, sometimes you can see what's in your mirror, and maybe it's not all that good to see. The one that I have that's so beautiful that a person gave me, sometimes you can see her hair poking up like she's standing on her tippy toes trying to look out of the mirror. And she turns the little faces I have on it and all that, and she laughs a lot. I've heard her before, but, she doesn't hurt anything, so it's okay. Let's see. On All Saints' Day, Polish Catholics cover mirrors because the veil is thin and it's easier for a spirit to pass through a mirror. Let's see. Sri Lankan Buddhists cover mirrors, believe that the spirit becomes confused, which is true, after seeing its reflection, and when confused, to pass into the next life, it just stays with the reflection. And in China, they believe if a person sees a coffin's reflection in a mirror, it means another death in the family. So that's why you don't have the mirror around where the deceased or the coffin can see the reflection in the mirror, because it will be a bad omen. Now, in the Victorian time, they took pictures of the deceased, and you could get hair made into jewelry and dolls made of your children. I have one, an effigy doll. That was a wax doll made in 1880 for a little girl that died at 9 months old. And it has her hair, it has her energy, and her mother used to put it in the, in the cradle and loved it, and it likes to be held. Its eyes brighten up, and it does. So they would make dolls. They did everything. And but the photography was very important. It was very new. And sometimes that would be the only photo they would have of the person was right before they would get buried. And the man who, I want to say, Louis Gary, I can't even remember how to say it. It was a pioneer in photography. I can't pronounce his French name here. I'm a little Southern boy. I can't pronounce the French name. But he was one of the pioneers in the early 1800s would say, secure the shadow before the substance fades. And that means take the picture before the person changes. And in death photography, that would mean take a photo before they're gone. And because that's all that's going to linger. You won't, that's going to be your memory. So catch the image before it fades away. But that's kind of what mirrors do. When we look into a mirror, we see ourselves in a reflection. We see ourselves in a different way. And I can see why a spirit seeing itself in the mirror would think that it's preserving its life in a way, even if it's topical, And I understand that they can get caught in it, because I'm telling you right now, I thoroughly 100% believe they can haunt mirrors. Like I said, my cousin has her mirror that she won't even put in her house. I have one that I haven't gotten out since I moved, but I got it out of an old house. You would not have believed all the stuff. And it was this man had died, and they just put all of his beautiful antiques in this rotten basement, And I was given this mirror, and it has they call them a rolling pin mirror. It had a rolling pin carved, kind of like wood carving on it, and I put it up. I would put it in my hallway. I wouldn't put it in my bedroom, because you would see this shaggy-haired, black-haired man who would ever so often, start moving around. You'd see him behind you. So I was like, well, that's not going to go over real well, with my guests. So I just put it up high enough where you could tell it was a mirror, but they weren't seeing the man in the mirror. But he didn't hurt anything. That was his mirror. That was from, he just transferred his spirit into it. And they had his things all packed down in this basement, and it was rotting. Everything was rotting. And I thought, all of his beautiful antiques, and they just put them in there. So that was one way he kept himself alive. And like I said, I'll find that mirror, bring it out. And I will get it cleansed sometime. But, and I will have to have a show. I will do a show in the future if people are interested. I can tell you how to cleanse your house properly using all of the elements, because if you only use smudge and you don't put down salt and water and all that, it may smoke it out, but after the smoke goes away, sometimes they come back. So you have to draw a barrier with salt and water or what we call Florida water here works real well. And you draw a circle with that. You tell them to get out. You do certain things, and then you smudge them. And then when they leave, they can't come back through the barrier you drew with the salt and the water, and it works wonders. If you try to look at something like these spirits and think it's like a demon or something, you say, "Get out of my house, demon," and it's not a demon, or it's not what you're calling it, you're not going to have any power over it. And sometimes it can make them mad. So that's why if you get a Catholic priest to kind of shake things out of your house and they don't adhere to what the Catholic priest is telling it, you can make it worse. So, but if you do it as energy, it's energy. You change the energy, you push them out, you make it unbearable for them. They get smoked out, get overwhelmed, and you push them out, and they can't come back in sometimes. And sometimes if they've been there a long time, it takes a while to do it. So sometimes you have to try it multiple times. Now, talking about cleansing and things like that, I work at a metaphysical store in Pensacola. I work at Live and Let Live metaphysical store on Softly Field Road, and the owner is a voodoo priest. He is Sal Gandolfo, and he has an assistant who's also Matt Ferguson, and they're adept at doing these things, and also that we have all the supplies to do it. You can go there and get all the advice you need to cleanse your house. And if you don't have a metaphysical store near you, you have the internet, so you can always go to the internet and order Florida water. I always get 2 or 3 bottles because I love using it. It works great. Jill Gray has wonderful sprays that have special waters from wells that are blessed, and they're great on getting rid of spirits and energies like that. And but it's all doable. You just have to look at it as energy. Don't look at it as something else sometimes, because if it's not what you think it is, you may not get a handle on how to get rid of it. But if you come into the store, I'm there usually Tuesday afternoons, Thursday, Friday afternoons, and Saturday I'm there all day. And you can come in, and there's 2 other readers, Terry O'Connor and Tony Talley. And you can come in and get advice from us, and we'll give you advice on how to take care of these spiritual issues. And some of them are spiritual issues, and some of it's energy issues. So come into the store, call the store, or look in your local area. Most towns have metaphysical stores, but if they don't, just go to the internet, get you a good sage, get you some good Florida water, and get in that house and say, "This is my house," cleanse it, do it. Because I know how scary it can be. I've been scared by quite a few things through my life when I was younger, and I know exactly how it is to be victimized by fear, not knowing what to do, how to make it go away. And if you have children, you don't want your children being scared. And even if it's not doing anything bad, if it's just scaring you by seeing it, you can take care of that. Sometimes you can tell them, say, "You're scaring me. Please don't do that. Leave. This is, find somewhere else to go, or don't do that." And sometimes they'll mind. And then again, sometimes they take that as a challenge. And if they do that, then you need to get that out of your house, girl. So you can do it yourself. If not, see if you can contact a metaphysical person who knows. Not every metaphysical person knows how to cleanse a house correctly, or sometimes they will antagonize the spirit. So you have to be careful. You need to be cautious. And if you do something and it makes it worse, then you need to contact somebody who really can take care of this. So now I think we're coming to the end of our show. I hope that you've enjoyed my Shadow People Haunted Mirror stories. And let me tell you, my electronics have given me up and down the road. So when you talk about spirits, it happens. So I hope you could hear me. I hope that this has opened your mind to look at things a little differently. And don't be afraid. Tackle things head on. Get it cleansed out. Find someone who can do it if you can't. It can be done. So now I want to thank you all for coming to this radio show and listening to me talk to you in the dark. And I hope it hasn't caused nightmares, but if it has, you only have yourself to blame. So now I want to wish you all a wonderful and creepy good night, and we will talk to you again next Thursday.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.